What's up, everyone? Adam Gelman here again, making another video. Today, I want to discuss one of my favorite subjects in all of the hobby, and that is Topps Chrome. It's one of those things that over the last probably 10 years of wrestling cards has become the focal point for a lot of collectors like me. Um, it's one that's been around in the hobby since the early 90s, so this is now just for the first time really getting its time in the spotlight of the wrestling side of things. Can't be more excited about that. I think we've seen some amazing Chrome style cards come out in the last few years. I want to do a deep dive into some of those sets and sort of break it down DX style and sort of go through this set by set. Ever since I was a little kid, like Topps Chrome has been my favorite. Baseball, when it started, I had to get the Topps Chrome rookie cards of all of my favorite baseball players, football players, leading up to when it came back to wrestling in 2014 and 2015. I wasn't quite into wrestling cards then, but when I got in around 2017, a couple years after they were released, that was the first place that I wanted to go because those have always been my favorite cards. They're so appealing in terms of an aesthetic perspective. They look great in the showcase. You can see most of my stuff behind me is all Chrome style cards because they just look so awesome. I've never been somebody that's really liked vintage cards, never really liked cards that aren't the shiny stuff. That doesn't mean I don't have appreciation for awesome looking stuff like that comes out in Impeccable or National Treasures that have already come out in wrestling cards or are going to be coming out soon. But I think the Chrome has always been my bag. It's always been my jam. And whenever new Chrome sets come out, I dive in head first. I remember when I was growing up, like these were always the cards that made me sort of want to sort of get the best of the best. Like they were always the most premium cards until the later 1990s, later early 2000s, where contrived scarcity in that respect had really sort of taken off. Before that, the refractors were the top of the line, and there weren't really much else that you were going to find. And then as they started to become numbered and all the other things in the early part of the turn of the century, like this all took off. And for somebody like me who's a player collector first, loves rainbow collecting, I've completed a number of Topps Chrome rainbows because that's always been my main focus. So I know that there's still some level of lack of familiarity of why these cards have the legacy that they do, and I wanted to take this time to build a video around sort of going through it set by set, the Chrome style cards, taking a little bit of time to start back at the beginning of it and then all the way through to 2021 Chrome and the eventual release of Prizm, which is Panini's version of Topps Chrome. So excited to do this video. Let's get started. All right, everyone, let's take a step back and let's look at where wrestling cards have seen Chrome cards before Topps actually picked up the mantle in 2014 with the first branded Chrome set. If you go all the way back to WCW, like there's been Chromium style cards that have been released much well before any of these other sets I'm going to talk about really have taken hold. And recently, these cards, especially in high grade versions, have taken a very big step in value because they are some of the first Chrome cards of people that compose the most valuable parts of the hobby in wrestling cards, whether that's Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock or other places. Like these cards that sort of started the Chrome trend in wrestling cards um, are things that for a long time sat very much on the bargain bin shelves because they just didn't have the collector base coming in that wanted to go after them. Now, when you look at Chrome, this is where the new people come in and want to be a part of wrestling cards. They go and they look for these sort of legacy type cards, the Chrome style cards, to drive really what they've seen as a sister release in baseball and football. And because these cards have become, the standard in just about every sport that they've ever been released in, like when new people come in, these are the places that they want to go. So these cards have seen much more of a rise in value recently because of that factor. New people looking for the first Chrome cards that exist, looking for their favorite people in these style of cards. Now, most people aren't going this far back, but I'm still going to cover them either way. So, when the WCW Chromium sets were released, and when there were other Chromium ones, even you could talk about Action Packed a little bit because even though they're not Chrome, they're kind of like that shiny type card. Like for a long time, they were really cool looking, but as I said, no one really liked them. And it really took the release of Heritage Chrome in 2005 and 2006 to really sort of jumpstart people looking at these cards as a valuable sort of part of their PC. The problem is they're heritage branded. So I've talked with a number of people. I know that this was brought up on a recent video as well. Like the reason that 2005 and 2006 Chromes through the heritage brands aren't as valuable is for a couple of reasons. One, collectors gravitate towards the branded Topps Chrome flagship sets, not the heritage ones. Those tend to be more sort of niche products that specific collectors like because they use vintage designs and they use like designs that are more appealing in that regard. For me, I love those 2005 and 2006 heritage sets. Like the cards are stunning. They do have refractor versions. They have retail X-fractor versions. They have superfractors that are numbered to 25 in some cases. Like, you know, it just doesn't follow the normal Topps Chrome sort of parallel structure or Bowman Chrome parallel structure, which led into the Topps Chrome parallel structure, which is, you have the base card, you have the refractor, then you have numbered versions with gold usually being 50, you have orange out of 25, black out of 10, red out of 5, and then the superfractor 101. Like none of that existed in those heritage sets because in a lot of those times, like it hadn't been really popularized within baseball or football cards yet either. So usually for baseball cards and football cards that are from this era as well, like they like collectors like going back and sort of getting the refractors and some of the other things, but the popularization of that parallel structure really didn't happen until probably 2007, 2008, even into 2009 and 10 when Panini sort of first came on the scene. Like that type of explosion of the parallel structure is really what drove rainbow collecting, where the term rainbow came from, because if you put all of them together, they look like a rainbow. Like that all started really more closer to 2010 than it did to 2000. And so to see the heritage WWE sets released during this time, not only do they not have the Topps Chrome branded name on it, it's Heritage Chrome. It's not following that parallel structure. That doesn't mean the cards don't look awesome. And there are some of them, especially on the superfractor side, where you have a lot of stuff going on that sort of brings some questions up. Like some of the superfractors aren't numbered. There's some questions around whether they were given to employees and how those got out to the public. But there are superfractors that are out of 25. Those goes for considerable amount of money compared to where they were even a couple of years ago. Like I remember you used to be able to get some of these superfractors out of 25 for under $100. Now you're going to be tough to find any of the big ones under $500. Some of them rarely pop up. A lot of them are in collections. A lot of them are graded. So a lot of these cards are just going to be much more of a focus that way. So from a historical perspective, this is where I think Topps sort of missed the boat originally. But when we start getting into the more modernized Chrome sets, like this is where things tend to take off. And now the new era of collecting, where Chrome has taken the forefront as the investment standard, the cards that everybody wants to collect for their PCs, stuff like that. So from a historical perspective, that's where how we got to this point. Okay, everyone, let's talk about 2014 Topps Chrome WWE, the first ever branded Topps Chrome wrestling product that was ever released. Now, if you go back to the end of 2021, there were jumps in value for this product that were just unlike anything I'd ever seen before. We saw cards that were selling 2, 3x at a time over where they were before. And I think people are starting to realize, we're starting to realize at that point how important this set was to the overall sort of landscape of collecting in WWE. So let's talk about sort of how we got here. So back in 2014, like wrestling cards weren't where they are right now. And Topps was a company that was printing to order all of their products. So what that meant is like they would solicit a product, months and months ahead of it. Before it started printing, they'd show you what it looks like, they'd show you a few examples of the cards, and then card shops would submit kind of how much they wanted to order. People who had direct accounts ordering from Topps would say, this is how much I want to order. And then they would take that information and actually print the product. Because wrestling cards were not big, it was a very small niche within a larger hobby. Um, no one really wanted to order Topps Chrome. It was the first time it had been done in wrestling. Heritage wasn't all that successful when it was released originally. Like wrestling cards as a whole were just down. The Rock was on the verge of retiring. Stone Cold Steve Austin was gone. Like for the most part, like wrestling cards just weren't at the top that they in the heights that they were, today. So very few people pre-ordered Topps Chrome, and when Topps went to print it, they only printed less than 500 cases. I think somebody said at one point there was 250 to 300 cases they were estimating based on the odds that were printed on the packs. And it was a very small set. It was a small but awesome checklist, and it was something that I think Topps was testing the waters to see if this was a something that they could port over to a number of their different brands, because they at the time they owned a lot of different areas. They owned football, they owned baseball, they owned a whole bunch of different things. Panini really hadn't sort of gotten the exclusives outside of basketball, but this was still a time when Topps had a really bright future. And so they were probably saying like, "Hey, we've got Star Wars, we've got licenses all over the place. Let's see if Topps Chrome is really going to make the rounds here." So unfortunately, the pre-orders weren't strong, but fortunately for everybody now, like it's probably one of the scarcest produced Topps Chrome products in the history of Topps Chrome. Baseball, football, basketball, everything, like there was none of this printed. And there was retail versions of Topps Chrome that were printed in 2014 for WWE, but even those, I mean, like there really just wasn't a lot there because the main attractions weren't included in the retail thing. To get the gold refractors, to get the autographs and the parallels and the superfractors, like you had to buy hobby box, and there just weren't a lot of them. If you think about 2021, there was probably 5 to 10,000 cases of that printed. Like there were only 300 of these, and if you think about how many people are breaking cards online now, like 300 wouldn't last a week. So like that's what makes this such an attractive set for collectors, especially people like me who love a lot of the names that they see on this. It also doesn't hurt that Roman Reigns has his first Chrome card in here, has autographs in here, and if you go back to the end of 2020, if you go back to the end of 2021, that was the card that set off a lot of these fireworks that we saw leading into the rise into Prizm. Drake was able to negotiate with a seller who had the Roman Reigns Superfractor autograph PSA 10 listed on eBay. It was a really big price. I think he had it at $50,000. Drake got him down to $15,000. But what was so significant about that is that no modern wrestling card had ever broken that $10,000 barrier. Like before that, the Vince McMahon Transcendent Superfractor hit $9,000. Like a few Alexa Bliss cards came close, but overall, like this was the really first public plus $10,000 sale that we ever saw, and it was Roman Reigns. It wasn't a female, which was typically the value drivers at that point, and it was just an incredible thing to happen. So it really set off, sort of this boom in modern wrestling cards, likely spurred by the fact that Panini had announced that they were taking over wrestling, starting with Prizm in April. You had a bunch of people come in who were looking for sister products in wrestling that matched the legacy of what they were collecting in baseball, football, and basketball. And Chrome being as scarce as it was, like that was a natural place to start. Most people didn't go back to Heritage. They didn't go back to the WCW stuff that happened later. But this was really a logical place because it had gold refractors, which, like I've said in a number of other videos, like gold refractors, Prism golds, like it's the gold standard within the hobby is these cards. So to align that to the parallel structure that was small, right? They didn't have a lot of parallels in this product, but it was one that they could draw, that these new collectors coming in could draw parallels to within their existing collections. So you had a wonderful checklist. Like you had The Rock, you had The Undertaker, you had, even Andre the Giant, stuff like that. Now, there was no Hulk Hogan, there was no Ric Flair, but there are a lot of people in these sets that sort of a lot of the collectors had nostalgic ties to. So if you came in and you were like, man, I really want to get a card of The Rock, this was the first Topps Chrome labeled card of The Rock. It was a gold refractor, and within a month or two, they were selling above $5,000. And it's not shocking because these are legacy cards that everybody outside of wrestling cards coming in would want to take a look at. In the scarcity of the set, there were no massive parallel structure. Like Prizm, I think, had 20 to 25 different parallels. This didn't have even close to that. It had a base card, it had a refractor, had an X fractor, which was a retail exclusive, it had the gold, and then it had the super fractors. The autographs had red refractors too, but they didn't have golds. So there was no gold Roman Reigns autograph. There was only like the base, the refractor, the red, and the superfractor. And those have come down considerably with the way that the hobby's been performing lately and the changes in the economy. But I mean, they're still well above where they were before this all started. And I think if Drake were to auction that Roman Reigns again, I'm sure he would probably get more than he did spend for it even back then. So I mean, like this set is a standard within wrestling cards. And I saw in a video recently, like everybody leans towards the Wrestling All Stars, the WCW set, autograph set as like their top two. And I heard, you know, a couple of people sort of scoffing at the fact that 2014 Chrome wasn't going to be the set to collect. And I can guarantee you that there is never going to be another situation where a Topps Chrome branded set, they only print 300 cases of it, especially in a set that has the most, well exposed movie actor in the history of wrestling. You have The Rock, who is literally that person and then some in his celebrity status. You have guys from AEW like Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, and you have Cody Rhodes, who's a modern guy. You have Bray Wyatt's rookie cards. You have a bunch of female sort of stars that are driving this as well. Small autograph checklist, but great stuff all around. Plus, you have some of the legends that are driving some of this too. It's an awesome set, and it's one that will forever be in the pantheon of wrestling cards for that reason. Not just because of the scarcity, but because of how awesome it looks. This flagship design was just an incredible sort of success for Topps in baseball, and I think it's no shock that in wrestling it looks great as well. So I think as more and more people come into the wrestling card hobby, they will go back to sets like this because it says to them, this is the first Chrome cards and collectors love first. So I think if I'm looking at Topps Chrome at 2014, this might be the standard in which all other Topps Chromes are judged against because of the amount of you know difficulty it is to get the best cards. I mean, I think I'm seeing a couple of them auctioned here and there, but the prices are down because the hobby is down. But man, like these cards are just incredible. So really one of my favorite Topps Chrome sets of all time. No shock that a lot of the new collectors coming in are gravitating towards these sets, are enthralled by what they're seeing because the photography is great, the design is great, the checklist is great, and as we'll see in 2015, this was really the jumping off point because the set after this really sort of blew everything out of the water. But I didn't even talk about things as part of the NXT set that was included in this. So in addition to the main checklist, you also had an insert set of NXT cards, which included Bayley, Sasha Banks, and Charlotte Flair. Becky, my favorite target, was not included in that set for whatever reason, but this is Sasha Banks and Charlotte Flair's main sort of Chrome rookie cards. They sell for a really good amount of money. They don't have any parallels, so that was kind of unfortunate, but you can get the base ones, you can get them high graded, and they're going to be over $100 each. So like that even would have been really cool if we gotten some of those cards in the ways that we would get them today, where they have a lot of parallels. But those were just insert cards back then. But cool to see that Sasha and Bayley and Charlotte all had sort of a place in this as part of the women's evolution that started around this time. So again, 2014 Chrome, one of my favorites. Really love it. Excited to sort of go through the next few sets because I think they only get better from here in terms of content. But the collectors love first, so this is really the beginning. All right, let's talk about 2015 Topps Chrome. Now moving down the path here. So again, not a huge amount of success with 2014, but Topps did decide to come back with another set in 2015, and this time there was a lot more that was added to this. So where you had, you know, things in 2014, you had a couple of retail parallels, you had a couple of hobby parallels, really just sort of testing the waters. 2015 was really like the first sort of full scale Topps Chrome set. I don't have the numbers on how much was produced, but it was well above what we saw in 2014. The autograph checklist was significantly expanded. We had some awesome autograph checklists here, including people from the first set as well as some people from the next set. We had our first examples of Hulk Hogan. We had our first examples of Alexa Bliss and some of the modern guys that are populating WWE right now with the return of The Undertaker, The Rock. Still no Stone Cold Steve Austin, but you had Ric Flair, you had other guys. And it's great that and Ric Flair hasn't made as many of an appearance recently because of his problems with WWE, but overall, like, this was one of the more complete checklists that exists out there. And I think overall, like, what we wanted to be able to do here is say, um, and Topps, what they wanted to be able to do here was say, like, hey, we're coming back with Topps Chrome. We're going to make it better. So not only that, but they had more parallels. So we had, X Factor, we had the Atomics, we had, a bunch of different things with reds and golds, and autographs had superfractors, base cards had superfractors. There was a lot more numbering, low numbered stuff. So a little bit, like, again, still not full 2020 and 2021 Topps Chrome, but there was a lot of stuff, a lot more stuff going on in 2015. I don't think the design was as strong. Like, I think the 2015 design is good, not great. But it's one that I think that picture of Hulk Hogan where he's ripping off his shirt, they have the autographs there. Those have gone for a ton of money. And I think we've even seen some of the big cards sell from the set from 2014. I don't think we've seen the 2014 Rock Superfractor. I think we have seen the 2015 Rock Superfractor, and it's buried in somebody's PC at the moment. But I think, like, that's the thing here is, like, we've seen the Alexa Bliss Superfractor RC autograph. Like, her rookie card is in this set. She has an autograph in this set. They were going for over $1,000 in the base level at one point. I know that she has a Superfractor autograph. My friend owns it, and it's a gorgeous card. She has, a number of different cards that are all out of 5, all out of 10, great looking stuff. And that didn't happen in 2014. That part of WWE really hadn't started. So this was the first modern evolution of, like, the women's division, NXT, all of those things. So you had, cards and rookies from people in this set that were part of 2014 because the focus of WWE had shifted over that year in between the release of the two sets. But there was a Rock card, there was a Roman Reigns card. Roman Reigns does have autographs in this again, in all the different parallels. Like, we haven't seen since 2021, when all of this boom really started. We haven't seen the major cards really sell for Hulk Hogan. We haven't seen the major cards sell for Roman Reigns. I'm talking the red refractors or the superfractors. We did see a couple of major cards sell from The Rock. We've seen other things because, this set, and Hulk Hogan too, like, this set is really sort of driving the modern sense of what Topps Chrome really is. And unfortunately, this was the last for almost 5 years. So, like, there was a huge gap in between 2014 and 2015, to 2020, when we saw our first real look at, like, current WWE in Chrome format. Going back to 2015, you had Charlotte Flair autographs, but there wasn't much of a contingent of people within NXT that had sort of transversed that women's evolution yet. Like, you had a Paige card, you have some of those cards from the Bellas and other things like that probably made an appearance, but it wasn't modern WWE outside of, like, these major rookies in Alexa Bliss, the Charlotte Flair autographs, Sasha Banks, and a few others. Like, so when we get into modern WWE sets in 2020, that all changes. It's almost completely different format. This was also one of those sets that still was very underprinted. There wasn't a lot to go around. Boxes of both 2015 and 2014 were selling for crazy money because there's so few of them still left unripped. But because it's Topps Chrome, because this was the second year, collectors were more familiar with it. More people were bringing those cards to their PCs. And again, because this is the Undertaker, this is the Rock, this is, the Hulk Hogan's first Chrome cards. Like, that people are going back and adding these to their collections because they see it as such a major thing. So, really cool set with Topps Chrome 2015. Now we'll jump into 2020 and 2021, where things are a little bit more modernized. Let's talk now, moving into sort of the more modernized era of Topps Chrome. Let's talk about 2020 Topps Chrome, which for the first time in 5 years was released. This is one of those sets that I was around for. So when I got the notification from Topps that Topps Chrome 2020 was being brought back after a 2019 year, which in wrestling cards was probably one of the worst years in the history of wrestling cards, seeing 2020 come back with Chrome was just a revelation. The design was awesome. It was unique to WWE. So it was a set that did not use the baseball design. It was a brand new design. We saw a full parallel structure. We saw autographs. We saw inserts. We saw everything across the entire spectrum of what Chrome was all about. So I think what drove it for me was that it came out and it was a very inexpensive boxes. So you could get at pre-order boxes of Topps Chrome for like $60, and buying cases of Topps Chrome were in the $400 to $500, maybe a little bit more as they got closer to release. But now it's $250 a box because so many people went back and ripped all of those. But you had like awesome, awesome stuff. You had The Rock, you had Roman Reigns, you had all these guys, and you had all of the modern stars that have sort of made their name for themselves across the history of WWE, plus all the new stuff like the women's division that had since exploded since 2015. So you had like the first Chrome cards of my favorite Becky Lynch, you had Asuka, you had the same people with like Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair and Sasha Banks and all of these different people, but it was like the first real sort of full main roster that we've seen, plus a huge amount of the NXT guys as well. So you had your first Chrome cards of people like Rhea Ripley, and Tony Storm and so on and so forth, which now are leading the women's division 2 or 3 years later. This was also coming out at the end of like a really long hiatus due to COVID. Um, and it was weird because like when we got into 2020, like COVID slowed everything down. But Topps had released Road to WrestleMania in January and then did not release anything for the entire year outside of Transcendent, which most people couldn't afford. You get into like September, October, and Topps Chrome hits, like people were starving for wrestling cards. So you had boxes starting at like $60. They shot up to like $100 almost immediately because people were just shocked that wrestling cards are finally coming out. Now, you had for the first time like a full parallel structure, as I mentioned. You also had inserts. You had all these different things that were never part of Chrome to begin with, plus an awesome design. You had image variations. You had autographs on card. Great autograph design. Like overall, this set could not have been better. It's one of my favorite WWE sets ever released for good reason because everybody loves on-card Chrome autographs. Thankfully, all of the Chrome sets had on-card autographs. There were no stickers, so really cool to see that. You had an updated checklist of the Rock and Roman Reigns and all those guys, plus all these new guys that were driving like for the first time value in these cards that were never available before. Um, and the image variations, the rips were fun. Like you had breakers for the first time that were getting into this deep, like really cool stuff. And I think what happened in 2021 is that as 2014 and as 2015 really shot up, people started to realize, oh my God, there's another set. There's another set after that. Like, so then this started to go up. You had superfractors that were at one point selling for $20 and $30 of the low tier guys, now selling at $200 and $300 at the lowest level. So like the Ivars of the world were still selling for ridiculous money because they're superfractors, and the superfractor is a standard. And like I talk a lot about like legacy. The legacy of the superfractor is humongous. And Topps Chrome had a ton of them in 2020. So you had an IV image variation superfractor, you had the base superfractor, you had the autograph superfractor, you had the insert superfractors. Like this set was chock full of those superfractors that everybody wanted. But because it's still a superfractor, it's still 101. Like, and wrestling is almost entirely based in player collecting. People went back and wanted to get everything that they could. Red refractor started to go up. The orange refractor started to go up. The golds exploded because, as I said, gold refractors in the hobby are just a thing. So even though they're out of 50, they were selling for ridiculous amounts of money. This was like in a hobby that didn't support grading, right? So wrestling cards for a long time in the modern sense did not do anything with grading. Like wrestling collectors just did not see grading as a viable option. It was expensive. Wrestling cards were still cheap. You weren't seeing a huge increase. So there wasn't a lot of grading. But as 2021 came and this boom happened with the Roman Reigns sale and like the Rock sales hitting $5,000 and $10,000, like those drove more people to start submitting these cards for grading. And it was a really cool thing to see people start to see Topps Chrome as like the child of the 90s that it was in baseball and football, and that nostalgia and bringing it to wrestling with a full roster. Like that was really cool. And then on top of that, almost on the heels of Topps Chrome, Topps also released for the first time ever in wrestling, they released Topps Finest. So you had superfractors in that, you had the parallel structures there, you had on-card autographs, you had all of those different things that made Topps Chrome awesome. You got a double dose of it in 2020 and 2021, which I'll get to in a second. But this was such a cool experience to be a part of. I think I ripped like 20 cases of Topps Chrome at that point. I pulled some amazing cards, but what really was cool to me was the dual autographs for the first time. So they had these fantasy matches that sort of were um, driven by, like, hey, if this person could have wrestled in this era, like what would be a really cool sort of match for them to have. So you had Trish Stratus and Alexa Bliss. You had Charlotte Flair and Lita. You had um, Kevin Owens and Stone Cold Steve Austin were in the set, so that was Stone Cold's like first one of Stone Cold's first Chrome cards released in sort of this branded Topps Chrome set. He did have Heritage stuff, but this was one of those cards. You had like The Rock and Roman Reigns. You had The Undertaker and Finn Balor, and then there was Seth Rollins and Shawn Michaels, which had a dual autograph. So when they had autographs available to be signed, these were stickers, but man, these cards were so cool. And I remember pulling the Alexa Bliss and Trish Stratus dual autograph, and it was like the coolest thing ever. I pulled a bunch of different really rare cards. I pulled a Black Undertaker out of 10. Like I pulled a Superfractor. It wasn't anybody good, but it was like, those are the types of things that drive people to rip and rip and rip and rip and rip, and I sure did. I believe I own one of the only completed Topps Chrome rainbows. I have the entire Becky Lynch image variation rainbow Superfractor all the way through to the base card. I have a bunch of those sort of cards on her regular base card as well. I don't think the photos is cool on the regular card as it is on the image variation, so I was glad to get the Superfractor there. But those were cards that I targeted from the beginning. So for the first time ever, like I was there in wrestling when this Chrome set was released, and I dove in head first for that very reason. But yeah, if I had to put together my Mount Rushmore of like wrestling cards, like it would be really tough for me to keep 2020 Topps Chrome off. But I mean, man, even the 2020 Topps Finest set was just as good. I don't think the base cards were as cool because they tended to be cropped and instead of like the design that they used in Chrome, but the autographs look much better in Topps Finest. And I think we saw some insane prices for the Roman Reigns Superfractor autograph. Some of the other superfractors that were there. I do have the full Becky Lynch superfractor through base card rainbow in Topps Finest as well. So like to get both the rainbow from Topps Chrome and Topps Finest is what drove a lot of collectors to have that experience with this set, and why those boxes of Topps Finest started to climb in price. Why the Topps Chrome boxes in 2020 went to $250 because people saw that this was like the first real sort of Topps Chrome set that had just a rainbow to collect instead of just randomly numbered different types of cards for an atomic or an X-Fractor or a pulsar or whatever it is that you want to call it, like we had in 2015. So really cool sort of thing to go through with both Topps Chrome and Topps Finest on the heels of one another, and a lot of those are still major focuses for everybody. I mean, you see the Rhea Ripley cards still sell for a ton of money. The Roman Reigns cards still sell for a ton of money. Like there was an extended set within Finest that wasn't part of Chrome where you had rare SP sort of high numbered cards. You had The Rock, you had Stone Cold Steve Austin, you had Ronda Rousey, you had a bunch of people in that extended set that had their first like single Chrome card. Like to that point, Stone Cold Steve Austin, even to this day, like through 2021, did not have like a base Chrome card. He did have this extended Finest card, which I think was really cool. Like it went, like the price of that went up because he didn't have any single base cards. So like that year of 2020 was sort of the like, okay, we're gonna make this a regular thing. And as we get into 2021, you'll see why that was such a cool idea. All right, let's wrap this up with the release of 2021 Topps Chrome WWE, which is the last in the series until theoretically Topps gets it back in with Fanatics in 2026. So Now, 2020 Topps Chrome was pretty successful. We saw enormous rises in the box prices right off the bat. Singles were selling for really good money. Things were going really well. So it wasn't a shock to see Topps Chrome come back in 2021 with its second release in after sort of that break that it had from 2015 to 2020. And again, another design that was built separately from the baseball design. So by this point, the only sort of major sport that Topps has left under its umbrella is baseball. And normally the Topps Chrome is just sort of an extension of the existing flagship design, but here Topps did do a separate design for WWE, and it was really cool because it's kind of a retro, sort of like 90s level, sort of fun experience. It wasn't as much of a full bleed type of a situation where you had the photos that ran all the way to the border, but it was one that still looked really cool when you had all the different parallels in your hand. Um, so what made this set really cool is that you had again another expansion into some of the newer people that are coming into WWE. Raquel Gonzalez. You had some more of the Shotzi Blackheart. You had people that had debuted since the previous set. You had autographs of those people. You had the Fiend come in, which was one of Bray Wyatt's big success. Um, so a lot of those things had changed over WWE. Plus, you had the same sort of focus on getting a full sort of insert rainbow, all these different things. The best part about 2021 for the first time was not the base cards, it was not the autographs. It was an insert set called Five Timers Club, which had everybody in the WWE that had won more than five or more championships, and it had autograph versions of those cards as well. So you had Sasha Banks, you had John Cena, you had The Undertaker, you had The Rock, you had Stone Cold Steve Austin. Again, single chrome card, but it's an insert. So really awesome level cards that are available from the base card through the parallel structure into a superfractor. So, and those cards are probably some of the best looking WWE cards ever produced, those five timer clubs. Like, it is really cool. I mean, like the Rey Mysterio has a great photo. The Stone Cold Steve Austin has a great photo. Like the design is awesome. It's simple yet really cool to sort of put on display. It has superfractor versions of everything. Like they've sold for tons and tons of money because everybody loves the theme of a champion, especially ones that are sort of inscribed in the halls of WWE as the best of all time. Like that's what makes this set so cool. And as I was sort of reflecting back on my 2020 experience, I was like, okay, I ripped so much of 2020, like case after case after case. 2021, I was like, I'm going to do the exact same thing. But unlike 2020, the boxes started at pre-order much higher, so I couldn't get the level of volume that I wanted. But I was able to rip a ton of it because it was just such a cool set. And there was a lot of really good sort of additions to the base set, the inserts and stuff like that. You had things in these products that were building on the success of the previous year. I think over the course of my rips, like I was able to pull like an Alexa Bliss really rare autograph. I was able to pull some rare Becky Lynch cards. Still no autograph, unfortunately, but at that point she was out with her pregnancy, so they weren't getting her to sign cards. But it was something that sort of really made me want to sort of dive in deep again for the fourth time now. This is released for a lot of collectors who are now seeing the rise. And by the time this hits its stride, like we're right smack dab in the middle of the boom. And again, a long hiatus between the end of the previous year, the first release of the year, into a Chrome set took 5-6 months again. And so people were really hungry to get back into a wrestling set, get cards of these people that have updated gimmicks and stuff like that. We still didn't get things like Braun Breaker or Carmelo Hayes or Cora Jade or any of those people that really made the first year of Prizm so special, but it was something that they had a lot of really cool fun content. Is 2021 even close to as good of a set as 2020? I don't think so. but it was still really cool to see that they brought it back again, give us another shot at sort of collecting our favorites in Chrome. Because for personal collections like myself, where it's all based around one person and based around rainbows, like this drove me to collect everything all over again. So for the second year in a row, now even though there wasn't a Becky Lynch image variation set, I was able to secure the full rainbow for her Superfractor to base card again. There were more parallels this time because you had aqua, you had green, you had all these other things that were sort of supplemented into the base set that weren't part of 2021. So like, there was more to collect, and it was fun. It was exciting to sort of go do that again. I think the finest set coming out of this for a second year was probably one of the best finest sets released. Um, like the autograph checklist and everything was great. You had a lot of really fun sort of things like the legacies cards in finest 2021 versus 2020. I think were much better. The base design was better. The autograph design was better. Like I think from a finest perspective, there was an improvement. For Chrome, it was kind of like another year of it. If they had year three of Chroma, which I would have really liked to have seen, like I think we would have gotten some fun stuff in that. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see it, but it's something that the legacy of Topps Chrome continuing into a second year past 2020 shown that this was one of those sets that was going to forever be part of wrestling cards as long as Topps had the license. Unfortunately, Topps lost the license like literally like right after 2021 Chrome was released. But we saw Prizm, the release of Prizm in the beginning of the Panini era drive people to sort of go back and try and get a lot of these cards. And so you had the box price start higher and get to a point much more quickly of really high price wax. And I think what's so funny is that even though wax prices has dropped across the hobby, like Chrome 2020 and 2021 are still very expensive compared to where they were. Finest is still pretty expensive. Like all of those things exist, much more larger quantities, but the prices really haven't gone down because so many people love ripping these boxes. Um, and as we got into Prism, those cards are really Panini's version of these. They had sticker autographs instead of on card. They had, much different focus of the checklist, larger checklist, much more expensive box prices, much more expensive sort of entry level for most singles. You had a much larger parallel structure. So, like, the focus and consistency of Topps Chrome really didn't translate over into Prism as well. Panini also had to get that set out really quickly because their license started January 1st. The Prism was out the week of WrestleMania, so that was like a literally 4 months to sort of get everything in order and into these boxes to sell out. So, like, Chrome was much more able to sort of follow the normal production schedule, and you saw the level of quality that was included in that. There wasn't as many issues in Chrome as there were in Prism with like things like censoring and mistakes and sort of stuff like that. Like Chrome is such a consistent set, and it's always exactly what you're going to get coming into these boxes. And for $100, if that when they first started releasing in 2021, when it was like $100 a box, like even then those boxes were still delivering a lot of value. um, but yeah, 2020 Chrome still one of the best, but building into 2021 where they had these new inserts that were just tremendous looking cards, still widely chased to this day, all the way through the parallel structure, like that was really cool. When you had the fantasy matches in 2020, like they didn't have as many of those parallels. This time with the Five Timers Club, they went, the full range. So it was really cool to see black refractors and red refractors and orange refractors, and then autographs all the way up to Superfractor. It was just really cool set overall. So again, like yeah, it wasn't the landmark set that 2020 was, but man, it was still really cool, and I loved the photos that they were using. Much more action focused shots and stuff like that as well. So you had finest, which was kind of like the futuristic design. Chrome was still very retro and cool looking. So overall, I really enjoyed 2021, not as much as 2020, but still just a really cool set. So if you're a collector coming into the hobby with the Panini era, seeing what Select was able to accomplish, seeing what Prism was able to accomplish, a lot of that success was because Chrome came before it and people had that sort of nostalgic of attachment to these cards, and being able to tie them together is just key, because it gave a lot of investors the opportunity to come in ahead of it, get established in wrestling cards, and understand where the value was, so that as Prizm and Select were created, they were built on really the foundation that was laid by these sets. And in closing, like, I think we're in a spot, just to conclude all of these things, we're in a spot now where when Topps comes back, and they are coming back, they've already secured the license to come back with Fanatics. Like, I think there's an expectation that Chrome is going to lead that charge. I think Finest is going to come back. I think we saw Transcendent release superfractor autographs. We've seen Chrome level things happen across most of what Topps sort of has planned for wrestling coming into 2021 and blow up. So it's kind of expected that as they come back in 2026 or 2027, earlier if the deal to buy Fanatics or Fanatics to buy Panini happens, like, there's a lot of factors that go on whether or not we actually make it to 2026 before Topps gets these back. But man, I think these sets are really going to continue to sort of be the bedrock for where a lot of collectors from my era, where I want to go and get the shiny cards and stuff like that. These are the ones that I go back to every single time. Like, I still have searches set up for 2020 Chrome. I still have searches set up for Finest. Even though Topps doesn't have the license anymore, the value of these cards continues. Like, there's still a lot to be had in terms of value in these boxes, and there's still cards that haven't been pulled yet. Like, I still haven't seen one of the Becky Lynch Superfractors from 2020. Like, there's still big cards out there that have yet to be pulled. I haven't seen some of the Alexa Bliss big cards. I haven't seen some of these other ones that would drive, probably 4 and 5 figure values coming out of a box that, yeah, it's probably not built to deliver $250 worth of cards, but it's still going to be a really fun rip. And comparatively to where Prizm and Select are, like, it's very similar now. Like, buying a box of Select at $175 or buying a box of Chrome, you both get 2 autographs, you get a bunch of parallels. It's very similar in that respect. So, don't sleep on Chrome because it's no longer part of the license. Like, this is still a very big part of what, the hobby is based on. So, really fun talking about Chrome. It's like literally my favorite set. So to have an opportunity to sort of discuss this with everybody has been fun. But leave subscribe here, leave comments, follow me on Instagram. My handle is at WWE Gelman. You can see all the Chrome and Finest cards I have. I'm on Twitter at SC Uncensored. I'm looking forward to having a lot of these discussions. Thanks again, everyone. Talk to you guys soon.